Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 136 for Monday, April 12th, 2021. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is Pixel Riffs. You might know him as Jonny. I got that backwards.
Hello. This is a podcast about Minecraft, but sometimes we play other games. And in the render distance this week, you can hear us talking all about the satisfaction of Satisfactory, the fun farming in Stardew Valley, and the lure of the looter shooter. If you want to listen more to Joel and I just talking about whatever we feel like talking about before we start the show, and sometimes after we finish the show, you can get the extended conversation by subscribing to us on Patreon at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. You'll get us access to a special RSS feed that has the render distance in it. But here in the main show, we talk about Minecraft all day long, and we often play Minecraft all day long, as in your case, Joel. You've been designing some more stuff for your medieval city this week.
Yes, indeed. Once again, I have magically, I don't know how I managed to pull this off. I finished up the Mossy Goat Tavern and Inn, which is just across the street from the bakery that I talked about last week. It's a much larger build, way more complicated. I believe I might have had the foundation laid before I started this weekend, but everything above ground really had to take shape. And it was more complicated than I first thought. And I am thrilled with the results. It's the first time I'm really doing like a big build that has like a larger second floor than the bottom floor. I was transitioning from stone into wood and green terracotta, hence the Mossy Goat for the name of it. Very much inspired by just a loose memory of the Prancing Pony from the village of Bree in the Fellowship of the Ring. So not a big place, just meant to like you walk in and there's a barkeep that greets you and either gives you a room or gives you a beer or whatever. And then there was an upstairs with an attic. And so I put together all this stuff and really started to notice, now that I've got a couple of buildings around this square, specifically some taller ones, how when you're in the medieval town now walking around, I'm considering how everything now looks from all parts of the town. And it's really starting to feel like it's got a skyline now,
nice.
Which it's really fun. I've added some towers. I didn't need to for the inn. It's actually part of the building next door, even though I designed it to look like it's part of the inn. It really just gives a very small shop next to the inn a staircase that's outside of the building, so that you don't have to sacrifice like 3x3 blocks inside your shop to dedicate a staircase to go up to the next floor.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of stuff is there. Started adding balconies. So there's all these points in the town where you can actually get up above the roof line and look out in one direction or another. Or in this case, both actually. The tower has got balconies on both sides, both east and west. One looking over the river, the other one looking over the east gate. So it's really coming together quite nicely. And in a live kind of test, I also installed the Tables and Chairs data pack from Chuck version 4.3, which is a complete rework. He only just released it. They only just released it a week ago, maybe. And I got a DM on Discord from Chuck because when I first started using the Tables and Chairs data pack, I realized that in order to utilize it, you need the accompanying texture pack that Chuck provides. And I thought that while it's very, very cool, I was like, it just kind of felt outside of vanilla Minecraft for me. So I went in and I modeled very vanilla-esque chairs. Like I took his ornate tables and chairs and I brought them down to the bare basic bones. Basically just think like scaffolding, but with oak texture, just to make it look as close to vanilla as I could. And Chuck took inspiration from that. And when he redesigned the pack, he took a lot of ideas from what I had done and applied that to the pack now. And it's really cool because you create a new crafting block called the sawmill. And it looks like a log with a stonecutter blade on the top of it. And you just put planks into it and then click on a chair that you want to get the chair or the table out of it. Previously, you had to do like shaped crafting recipes with like slabs and fences and stuff like that, which was okay. And it felt very Minecrafty, but it was kind of cumbersome because you're just like, I'm using slabs and fences to make a stair. It doesn't, or make a chair. It doesn't really make, it was kind of hard to wrap your head around. And you had to remember all the different crafting recipes, which was kind of hard. In this one, it's a lot more point and click, which is great. He has more options for more chair designs. He's incorporated all the nether woods, which is great. I believe there are some stone chairs and stone thrones in there as well. There are some other things that I didn't dabble in, like he's added like mob trophies, and he's added candelabras and stuff, which I'm not really interested in. I specifically, I just want the basic tables and chairs. But what's nice about them is that as you click with the furniture hammer, which is a small hammer that you can make with the pack, it changes the number of legs on the table.
Oh,
so
that's
it goes,
fun.
Yeah. So if you have a 2x2 table, which is essentially 4 tables, you can click the corner that you're facing, and it'll eventually go from 4 legs to 2 legs to 1 leg. And so you can have a 2x2 table with legs in the corners like it would normally be, rather than 16 legs on a table, right?
Yeah.
Which doesn't look very good.
And presumably you can just put all of them on the inside corner and then have more of like a pillar supporting a table, where like the tabletop comes out towards the outside rather than it being supported at all 4 corners by legs. That's clever. I like that
Absolutely.
as an approach.
Yeah. And you can have one of the options for the table legs is you can create a pedestal table. So separately, you could say, "Oh, I don't want a table with 4 legs. I want just a single block table with just a 1 post in the middle."
Yeah.
Similar to how people use a fence post and a pressure plate now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And one of the other options is, of course, no legs. So it means that if you want to, you could have like a 3x9 table, and then all the table pieces in the middle, you could just have no legs on them, or you could use them as shelves. And because they're basically, I can't remember the exact term for it, but he uses some sort of data in Minecraft, gives it a random number that will just kind of keep it from conflicting with other data packs. And every time you hit the trapdoor with a hammer, which is essentially, these are trapdoors they just look like tables texture packs. And so what happens is you cycle through the different options. And so you could use it as a shelf. And it means that you can have essentially a wood shelf of any wood type in the game that sits on a ledge, just like an open or a closed trapdoor would be, I guess. Like in the same way that people use spruce trapdoors now for shelving.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's really versatile. It's really fun. Chuck was live in the chat during the stream, which is great. And it was really, really fun to check it out. The only thing that I will say about it that felt odd to me, as someone that plays vanilla Minecraft with some data packs for quality of life, but really we keep the play on the Citadel 2 vanilla, this feels like a mod more than a data pack.
Yeah. It's
even
interesting.
though it is a data pack.
Yeah, we've talked about the blurring of the lines between data packs and mods on the show before, and so it's interesting that you're actually feeling that shift now when packs like this become a little bit more complex. And I think it's probably the fact that you've got so many different textures to play around with, and it's adding so much to the game thanks to, I presume it has to work in tandem with something like Optifine to get all of the different textures in there, because that's just like different block state textures, right? It's
a really good question. I want to say Optifine is needed.
Yeah,
but it might not be.
I think
it was before, but I feel like he moved away from that because it was causing a problem. I know that he mentioned that because I had Optifine running, his version of Optifine, some of the textures didn't show up, but in mine they did, and so I don't know whether it's essential.
But either way, I think it's great that you feel like it's versatile, because that's always my first problem with whether it's mods or data packs, adding anything with different kind of, block states and different block models into Minecraft, is that instantly a lot of those things feel very specialized. They've always just got one use, and they're only really supposed to look like one thing. Whereas if you've got a table that you can also remove the legs from, and it becomes a shelf, and you can use it maybe for a bit of detail here and there as well. You can make the ceiling kind of curve inwards slightly more if you have something with a wood plank texture on it that isn't a trapdoor. Like you can start to use that for sub-block details that fit within the world of Minecraft already, instead of it just being, a model of a computer to go on your desk or something like that. I think that versatility is really what I would look for in stuff like that to keep things feeling vanilla. Otherwise, it just feels like you're adding in additional decorations to the scene that takes you out of the world of Minecraft in a way.
Yeah, 100%. And thank you, Jumbo Sale, and our live chat for grabbing some Optifine notes from the webpage from Planet Minecraft. We'll have a link to all this in the show notes. But you do not need Optifine installed to have it work. But Optifine installed will hide the pig saddles that are kind of hidden inside the chairs, which allows the player to sit in a chair and have your legs go straight out like you're sitting on the back of a pig,
Right,
which is
yeah.
nice. And before we move on, I'll say that the other thing that they added into this, which was really, really cool, is that if you go behind a chair and you punch it, you shift punch it, you'll push it under the table, because the chairs are like essentially armor stands that are made invisible that are holding the model. And so you can, rather than having the chairs always like a meter from the table, you can actually push them in or have some of them pushed in. It just adds a little bit of life to the scene. And again, I don't plan on sitting on chairs. There's not a lot of player environment interaction in my builds, but the fact that I can walk through my now furnished inn and have, there be tables and chairs around rather than stairs and slabs, it makes a huge difference.
That's super cool. Yeah, it definitely helps with the ambience of something like an inn when you really want to use sub-block detail, but half the time the chairs are always stairs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So what have you been up to, man?
This week, I completed the last of the outstanding biome dioramas at the museum in the Survival Guide world. I have now built a scale model of sorts of a shattered savanna biome. And that was quite a challenge in a way. Like I've obviously had to stick with regular acacia trees, and so I couldn't necessarily build it to scale as such, but I wanted to give at least the vibe of a shattered savanna. So I kind of went with a few different elements that I wanted to recreate, largely constructed of stone, a little bit of coal ore at certain elevations, and then grass and coarse dirt, the acacia trees growing from the top, and then a few little fragments of floating terrain. And then I thought the thing that really defines shattered savannas for me, aside from just the height, is the fact that half the time they have water sources that start in one block in the sort of highest reaches of these clumps of terrain, and then they fall about 100 blocks down into usually like a lake on the ground level, the sort of sea level terrain around it. And so for that, I just threw a water source above and actually carved out the floor of this biome so that it actually, curves inward and has a little hollow that the water all runs into, which has the side effect of being able to contain the water, but also makes the whole thing feel taller, that kind of negative space that I've added in by building stuff under the floor level. And I think it turned out really well. I was really happy with this. This kind of goes alongside the frozen ocean, Badlands, Mesa, and mountain biomes that I figured I wasn't going to be able to do justice in a small space, so I kind of highlighted those four as biomes that needed a larger area to illustrate what they were about. And I thought that came together really well.
I think it looks great. Yeah, no, I mean, and even though, like you said, that you had to go with a full-sized acacia in terms of the size of the logs, it doesn't feel like it. I still feel it reads correctly. Like it maybe feels like one of the lower parts where you're close enough to the trees that they still feel like this distance. But it's too bad that we don't have like a gray wood, like an ash wood or something like that, because then you could use like fence posts or something for the trunks of the trees, and that would have given it the proper scale. But like it's not missing anything, the way that it is.
I mean, if they want to do that with azalea, then I'm not going to complain. But yes, absolutely.
No, me either.
I think that there are definitely some parts of a shattered savanna that you could imagine looking like this and maybe expect to have another 60 or 70 block high thing above that's like the real shattered savanna. But with the space that we had, I figured that was pretty fun. So that was what I got done in Survival Guide. That and flattening out some more terrain on the northern side of the museum, because the biomes exhibit is on the southern side, and looking at it from the air, I realized I've been building a lot more on the south side of what is going to be this enormous building than I have on the north, and I want to keep some like vague attempt at symmetry when I surround the entire thing in a structure. So I guess I'm probably going to have to build a little bit more on the north side, and I flattened it out as far as a river and hope that will be enough space to do everything I want to do. I'm now having to figure out do I want to start building upwards? Do I want to start digging out a basement layer for some of this? And the answer is yes, both. But I will kind of need to figure out where the boundaries of this building are actually going to go, just so that I don't keep doing the easy thing and building on the flat and then realize that I have, a building that I can't see from one end to the other in the render distance.
Yeah, like a big shopping mall that it doesn't really feel like a museum. Do you have any plans to do like a mezzanine level where like there'd be like you can go upstairs, but then you can look down to some of the larger things that are going to be more than one floor,
Absolutely, I do. Yeah, there are balconies going through some of the smaller rooms already, and the only reason I haven't done more with that right now is that I didn't know quite what was going to be required for rooms like these biomes exhibits. But yeah, one of my favorite museums, the one that I'm basing a lot of my idea of what I want to do with this museum, is the Natural History Museum in London. And for their dinosaur exhibits, there were a lot of raised walkways that you could walk on through that, so that you could be like eye level with some of the dinosaur skeletons that were built from the ground up and meant to be sort of more realistic heights. So if you want to look a T-Rex in the mouth, you had to be off the ground a fair way to begin with. And so I wanted to get that kind of feeling, but yeah, be able to look down on some of the stuff like in the trees exhibit, so you can see the tops of the trees instead of walking through at ground level. So yeah, I'm thinking about stuff like that and trying not to bite off more than I can chew, but this is always going to be a big project, and I feel like once it all comes together, it's going to be really great. The other thing I've done this week is kind of a follow-up to the color-coded storage system that I did in my Minecraft RTX world. I've now got color-coded villager trading as well. So I built on the surface a trading booth for 12 of the professions, and I think there are 13, but there were 12 obvious colors that I could use before getting into, the black through white, the grayscale stuff that in RTX isn't necessarily going to show up as a color. It's just going to show up as, brighter or dimmer light if I use glass over a sea lantern, which is what I've been doing most of this with. So now in 12 separate booths, I have one of basically each profession aside from a shepherd represented there. And I've just been experimenting with Bedrock villager trading more than anything, but I thought it was kind of fun to color code their different booths. And now it looks like the villagers are in some sort of weird, socially separated nightclub whenever night falls. And I'll provide a screenshot for the show notes that's got this during, a kind of dusky, twilighty kind of time, so that you can really see the color pop. Because during the day, when there's natural light, you don't tend to see the effects of those colored lights all that much. But they seem to be having fun, so I'm on board with it.
Yeah, we call our villager trading hall on the Citadel the Hotel of Eternity, where you're welcome to stay, but you're never leaving. I feel like this is it looks like a neon prison. It's like,
it is a little bit.
It's like because it's so utilitarian in the design. I love the colors. I watched the video when you made it, and it's such a great way, because I often feel that using signs in Minecraft, it's what we have and it's what we're used to, but color coding is it's a much nicer way to provide direction, information, what's in the storage bin, what the villager is trading, refresh my memory, was it green for farmer or yellow for farmer?
I think it's yellow. Yeah, it's kind of difficult to tell the difference between yellow and lime green sometimes.
Yeah,
but, I think because the farmer's hat was yellow, I went with yellow.
Yeah. So it makes sense to you, it makes sense that's the the trade that you're going to have there, because it has an organic color that you associate with plants and leaves and things like
that. The ones I chose for the blacksmith professions, because they trade me all the diamond gear, were the blue range. So we have cyan, light blue, and blue is the toolsmith, the weaponsmith, and the armorer.
No, it makes total sense.
I think I'm going to start. I'm going to start calling this a neon, a capsule hotel, in the kind of cyberpunk kind of way. I think that's probably a good way of putting it.
Pods, they have them in I feel like I've seen them in not even in sci-fi stuff. It's like real stuff that they have in Japan.
Oh
where
yeah,
it's
they're
like
a real thing in Japan for sure. Yeah,
real
I think
thing where you can just rent a little room.
they get used as a kind of trope in a lot of sci-fi books that have Japan as a setting, or kind of take that kind of flavor and just project it into a far future kind of scenario. But yeah, I read William Gibson's Neuromancer a while ago, one of those kind of foundational works of cyberpunk literature, and the character, the narrator, stays in a capsule hotel like pretty early on. So yeah, I kind of have that vibe in mind for some of this, even though the area around that is still fairly medieval feeling. I'm just gonna work in details like this, kind of, just generating ideas for what I can do with the RTX stuff before I move on to something bigger.
That's right, because you're talking about doing a more cyberpunk build down the line once you kind of like stretch your legs and get used to what RTX can do, right?
Yeah, the lighting engine just lends itself to stuff like that. You want to be able to use color, and you can do so much with that, but I think a lot of it is going to tend towards more modern builds where electric lights and colorful lighting is going to be more common in a more modern setting anyway. So it makes a lot of sense. But villagers, as it turns out, are much improved on Bedrock since last time I played. I've been curing these guys for better trades from zombie villagers, and last time I played, cured zombie villagers were locked on one profession. They still had all of the new workstation blocks and stuff, but you couldn't change any of their professions, which was possible now, and much better if you didn't decorate your entire house with workstation blocks like I did. The amount of barrels I had to break just to stop them being fishermen was pretty impressive. But yeah, I liked just kind of cycling through trades and stuff. It just felt a lot more like what I'm used to from Bedrock Edition now. So it was painless, relatively speaking, as painless as working with villagers can be anyway.
I feel like the range at which they detect profession blocks is a bit far, because I've had that problem too, where you're trying to get them to do one thing and they're picking up another. It's like, where even is that? Like, that's not that's not even in this build. That's like next door. I feel like it's a bit far for me, but I imagine it probably makes sense in the natural generation situation where the villages are can be pretty widespread in terms of how far a bed might be from a profession block.
Yeah, and it's actually quite useful if you want to basically bait them around, if you want to make sure that they walk to a certain place instead of building a giant tunnel around them like you used to have to. You can just break their workstation, put it like 7 or 8 blocks away, watch them walk up to it, break it again, and kind of, bait them over to wherever you want them to go that way, which made moving them around a little bit easier. The one thing I think is different between Java and Bedrock with this right now is that Java villagers don't adopt the profession until they can pathfind to and physically be close to their workstation, whereas I think Bedrock villagers are just detecting, okay, it's possible for me to pathfind to that, and then they get the profession remotely. And that's still like a slightly tricky thing to navigate, but as long as you know about it, it's fairly intuitive to work around.
Right on. What do you think we get into some news?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting week to talk about, so let's get into it.
This week we have a new snapshot. It is a Minecraft Java Snapshot 21W14A. The full patch notes are on minecraft.net. It's a smaller snapshot coming after the Easter holiday for the developers at Mojang, but the new features in 21W14A include added raw copper, raw iron, and raw gold items. Tough blobs can now be found between heights 0 and 16. Smeltable ore drops are now part of the game. Ores that are smeltable now drop corresponding raw item forms of the ore instead of the ore block. These raw ores can be smelted just like previous ore blocks. This is to prevent cluttering in the inventory and have consistency with fortune on all ores. Ore blocks from old worlds and silk-touched ore blocks will continue to be smeltable. Changes in 21W14A include fully oxidized copper can now be waxed. There's a number of bugs that you can check out at the Minecraft.net article, but the ones that we thought were worthy of note are the world gen data packs can cause crashes when first generating a world. Fishing doesn't animate or render the rod, line, bobber anymore. The end dimension generates differently than it did previously. We actually spoke about this in the last episode, so that's been fixed. Excessive pillager spawning in pillager outposts has been fixed, and ocean monuments are completely empty. That would have been frustrating if you're playing on a snapshot world, so that has been fixed as well.
The other thing we wanted to highlight was another Meet a Minecrafter video. This was Grandparent Gamers. You can find that on the Minecraft YouTube channel. And it was basically a short interview with senior Minecrafter and streamer Bacon Mom, alongside a chat with Jeff Brand, a professor of communications and creative media at Bond University in Australia. Joel, you brought this one to the show and you had a chance to watch it. I haven't quite touched on this one yet, but do you want to share your thoughts on the Meet a Minecrafter?
So this was quick. It was something I stumbled upon, and I watched it because I recognized Bacon Mom. She has come across my Twitch feed a number of times, and I've tuned in once or twice. It's super laid back, pretty chill, as you can imagine. She is a senior. She's a grandma, and she's a Minecrafter. She is a lifetime artist, professional artist of over 40 years, and now she makes art in Minecraft. And I thought the video that Minecraft put up on their YouTube channel did a great job of showcasing Bacon Mom and what she does. I love that her creative world looks like quilts. Like it looks like quilts in Minecraft. It's amazing, and it's huge. Like they're not little builds. These are massive, right? And I liked the juxtaposition that they did of interviewing Jeff Brand, because he was talking about the number one reason why people over the age of 65 play video games, and that is to keep their brain engaged. Now, for most people, that's probably going to be, a stereotype of like, Candy Crush or some other, Facebook game or something. But there are some people out there that play video games. There's people that are older that are out there that stream on Twitch. I've seen a number of people that play Satisfactory that are older. And of course, they were highlighting Minecraft and talking about Minecraft in this video. And Jeff Brand had some interesting things to say about the way that grandparents will explain that they got into Minecraft as a way to connect with their grandkids, have the grandkids teach them how to play, and how that has created a much closer bond with the grandkids because they are not interacting at, I'm going to use big air quotes here, forced situations like family dinner. Like, I like family dinners now. I can't say I did when I was 8, right? You want to eat, you want good food, you want dessert. How fast can I get to dessert? How fast can I get back to whatever I was doing, right? You don't necessarily think that you're getting quality time with your grandparents at the dinner table, but that's how they see it. So the stuff that I remember from when I was a kid is not every single family dinner, although I have some memories from them. But I remember sitting on the floor in my grandparents' living room playing with Lego as my grandfather watched. And we did it together. I remember building Lego or building a model with my dad when I was a kid. So I remember those interactions, the play interactions versus the social interactions, I guess is what we would call them. And I'd be curious to hear more about Jeff Brand's work because he had some really interesting things to say. So I would encourage everybody to check it out. Bacon Mom is very sweet, and the whole video is like 7 minutes. So like, do yourself a favor on a Monday and it's a feel good video.
That's super cool. Yeah, it's always great to hear, again, how broad the Minecraft community is. I know we have a number of people who are grandparents or older players from our community, from my own community as well, and it's always just great to hear such a fun variety of perspectives. I think they're doing a really good job of highlighting those people on Minecraft's YouTube channel as well. They're not diving into the typical content creator type of folks. They are casting a much broader net and looking at the global scope of Minecraft in a way that is admirable, I think. So yeah, I will definitely watch this after the show. In the meantime, though, let's talk about this snapshot. I was quite amused by the fact that it said a smaller snapshot after the Easter holiday because the change itself feels weirdly big to me. These raw ores now dropping from iron, copper, and gold instead of obtaining the ore block. It feels like such a major shift, and one of those shifts that inevitably some people were going to come out of the woodwork and say that they didn't like because it doesn't feel like Minecraft anymore, in the same way that the zombie pigman changing kind of felt like they were removing an old part of the game in favor of something new. But I quite like this as a change. How are you feeling about it?
I think it feels like Minecraft. I'm embarrassed that I didn't point this out sooner.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, right. When you mine gold and iron, it drops gold and iron blocks, like ore blocks. It doesn't do the same thing that every other ore does in the game.
It's just been a fact of life in Minecraft for so long that we've never really thought about it changing. But now that it does, I think it's really interesting. It makes ores a lot more consistent. And as somebody who makes tutorials, it's going to be really weird explaining to people that this ever wasn't a thing. Because anybody who joins Minecraft now is just going to go, oh, okay, you silk touch it to get the ore block, or you break it with a regular pickaxe or fortune to get the drops from the block. And it's going to be really weird for people who start playing now, going back to older videos and going, wait a minute, why is he getting the entire iron block? And us just shrugging and being like, that's just kind of how they did it, I guess. And like, I like the sprites for them. I like the fact that, raw iron and golds sort of they fit the aesthetic of the blocks themselves in a new way because of the ore textures having recently changed. I feel like it goes hand in hand with the ore block texture change for me. Is that the behavior of these blocks is changing for players who knew anything different to begin with.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense to me. It looks good. I mean, to start off on some positive stuff here, like I really like the raw gold texture. Holy smoke, does it look good?
There's a lot of people saying it looked like chicken nuggets, and I'm like, you understand chicken nuggets were basically meant to look like gold nuggets, right? Like, I feel like the gold nuggets probably came before chicken nuggets.
It's a chicken and the egg problem. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, copper looks good too. I mean, it's fine. I wouldn't know what I would do differently about copper, but the only thing that I do find looks a bit odd is iron. I find it might be maybe a little bit too accurate to real life, or perhaps because the other ones are so vibrant and cool looking that iron just kind of pales by comparison. You know, like if I had seen iron on its own, would I be as critical of it? I don't know. But I feel like it might be an opportunity to go maybe a little bit more cartoony with the iron.
Maybe
if it had more of the same color as an iron ingot in it, I know that's not how it really works in stone, but it might have a little bit more shiny if the sprite was actually a little shiny, you know?
Yeah, I think the thing about it is that it's following the same color palette as the veins of iron in an iron ore block, which don't really look like refined iron ingots at all. Like they sort of lose that sort of peachy brown vibe to them when they get smelted into something that looks shiny and silvery. So yeah, it's kind of a difficult line to walk there, but it does have quite a bit of contrast in it, just for shading purposes, I expect.
Yeah,
to make it look like a little clump. And that's the thing that's been tripping me up, by the way, is not necessarily the fact that these items exist, but the nomenclature for them, because I instantly want to start calling them nuggets, but for iron and gold we already have an item that's a nugget and it's a different thing, and it's worth about a ninth of what we have when an iron ore clump or cluster or lump or piece. I don't know. I'm not certain what we call these things collectively other than just raw iron. Yeah, that's the thing that I've been kind of struggling over when I've been explaining this in videos. But overall,
because the iron ore is the block, right? Like that's what they call the block. It's called the iron ore. Yeah. Because I think outside of nugget, ore would be the next thing that I would think would be the most common way to call it. But of course, we already have that in the game. And I think, speaking of textures, boy, do you have to take a look at those iron and gold nugget textures and maybe revisit them, because now they feel real dated with this new stuff, right? And which reminds me, is there copper nuggets? Can you do copper nuggets?
There are no copper nuggets because they wouldn't really have a use. Like, they don't break down into anything that can then be crafted using copper nuggets in the same way that, you know, iron nuggets didn't really have a use for a while, but have now been turned into crafting recipes for lanterns and chains. And I expect a few people add a data pack recipe for chainmail using it because it kind of looks like a bunch of iron nuggets grafted together. But yeah, I think copper nuggets might come in future, and there's always opportunities to open up discussion about what copper can be used for after the Caves and Cliffs update, as the game continues into future updates, because iron has been having new recipes added for it since it was first implemented. Let's talk a bit about the sort of justification for this. Not that I feel like it needs to be justified. I like them just saying we wanted to make ore blocks behave the same across the board. Makes perfect sense to me. But they also said this is to prevent cluttering the inventory. How do you feel about that element of it? Because I think that's the thing that's been most divisive in discussions I've seen about these.
I think it's six of one, half dozen of the other. It's, it depends on how you play, and it depends on how much you collect. If you go at this with a regular pickaxe, it's better because obviously, if you run into gold ore in stone or in deep slate, both of those will give you raw gold. Previously, they would have given you two different blocks. So then there's two different inventory spots that are taken up by, 16 of one and 12 of the other.
Yeah.
Now you're just going to have, what's that, 38, 28, 28, in one stack of just gold ore that you can then smelt later. It gets complicated if you save it all, or you have a fortune pickaxe with you as you're going and you collect more of this stuff. Well, thanks to a video I watched from Il Mango, they expressed that you get 2.2 times more iron, gold, and copper raw ore when you use fortune on these blocks now. Well, that comes out to, if you mined a stack of each deep slate gold and stone gold, you would have two stacks.
Mm-hmm.
If you used fortune on it, highest fortune, let's say fortune 3, that's 4.4 stacks, right? So it's more stacks, not less.
Yeah. I think they're kind of relying on a couple of things. First of all, of you not finding a full stack of everything, so not automatically using your inventory in the most efficient way. And then I think when it comes to iron in particular, less so with gold, but more with iron, when you're first caving for it and you're not prepared with your inventory to acquire a whole bunch of iron at once, more often than not, you're smelting it and then turning it into useful stuff as you go. So I think on trips when people are going to be mining for iron more, intentionally, then they're probably going to prepare for that and clear out their inventory or have a chest nearby or something that they can go back and dump the stuff in if inventory clutter becomes a problem. And I think it's most significant that they are at least paying attention to more inventory clutter problems in the first place. And whether this is thanks to community feedback or their own playtesting about deep slate and regular stone having two different ore blocks and that just meaning your inventory fills up, I think it's good that they're at least trying to figure out ways of addressing that. And they could just be pushing like, well, no, take a bundle with you when you go caving and then you can tuck all of the deep slate ore in there if you have less of that. But they're providing multiple ways around the problem, like we've been talking about previously with the inventory situation and how it's broken down into lots of little problems and lots of little solutions instead of one big catch-all, add a couple of extra rows to the inventory kind of solution. So, yeah, I think it's a good discussion to have is, mathematically speaking, it's not necessarily going to save you that much more space if you have very specific conditions, but I think circumstantially it's going to work out for you pretty well. At least on your first caving trip when you're going and mining down to iron levels and deep slate levels and looking in both patches for iron before you even get fortune, I think it's going to be a space saver, which is going to hopefully be worthwhile for players.
And I don't go for fortune right away. I go for silk touch, at which point this won't change anything for me, right? So play style and when you're going collecting, I think is another thing too. I think it's a huge shift for the early game, like absolutely. And I love the consistency across the board, but I'm thinking that as players bring forth their just existing play style, or people that have worlds like I do with the Citadel, and we're not changing it when 117 drops, so we all have silk touch and we all have fortune, so the chances of me carrying both pickaxes around, not high. I'm probably just going to go in with the silk touch and fortune things later, at which point it's going to be the exact same experience for the most part. The one thing I can't remember if I brought it up at this stage or not. Maybe this is something I could save for the discussion later, but I just feel like I store a lot of my ore blocks in the block form. And you, as far as we know yet, you can't do that with raw iron, raw gold, and raw copper.
Yeah, you can't make like a block of raw iron in the same way that you can make a block of smelted iron. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not even suggesting that as I'm not like as a builder. I don't necessarily want another texture. I mean, I'm not going to complain, but
Yeah, I'm like, I do. Hello.
yeah, but
Like
it's not high on the list, right? Well,
Sure.
I'm thinking about like when I've got 4 stacks of coal in my inventory and I can condense them down by dividing them by 9 into like a stack and a half of coal blocks. Which just saves space and time, especially if you're dealing with like a mine where you've got chests and chests and chests of stuff that you're not going to use right away. Like I find condensing stuff like that is a lot better. So yeah, it's one of those things where I can see how it will and could reduce inventory clutter. And I think the consistency of the behavior is far and above the better aspect to this. I don't think it's going to do a lot to narrow things down inventory wise, but I think that the consistency is a big step. And like I said, the textures are real pretty.
What I'm wondering now is there potential for items like this to pop up in other areas? Because we're used to getting iron ingots or gold ingots from loot chests, but what if raw iron and gold and copper start showing up in those instead? I mean, it's not going to make a huge difference to everything, but for people who tend to scrounge iron from, villagers' chests and stuff in the early game to make an instant iron pickaxe instead of going through the different tiers of tools, like, is it going to force a smelting stage if you find iron in raw form in those chests instead of iron ingots? Same with gold. There is potential for these to also show up in archaeology digs. Maybe lumps of raw iron come out of dirt now, considering that we knew that the diamond and emerald blocks they showed us at Minecraft Live were placeholders. There's a few other things that drop iron, like iron golems, for example. Zombies, occasionally. The drowned are going to drop copper, and piglins would drop gold ingots, but what if those get changed to the raw forms? I kind of wonder if there is scope for some of that to shift around and what that means for the balance of the game. And I would imagine they're going to stay away from having iron golems drop raw iron, because you get the impression that the iron golem is made out of iron blocks. That's kind of the crafting recipe players have for them. And so they've already been kind of smelted and processed and refined. So that makes sense. But I feel like for the other mobs, the fact that they drop iron at all is a bit of a mystery. So why not have it be raw iron this time, like they've been mining and just been zombified before they could return and smelt anything?
Worth noting too that at the moment, Nether Gold ore has not been affected.
Yes, it still breaks down into nuggets, confusingly enough, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that eventually changes. But so right now, Nether Gold ore, the trade-off there is that it's not as rewarding as even if we talk about the old way that a gold. Oh no, it's the same. If you have Silk Touch, it's the same. If you grab a Nether Gold ore and smelt it turns into 1 ingot. But if you just mine it, you have a range of, I can't remember what the ratio is for nuggets, but it's around 1.8 or something like that. I can't remember what it is with fortune, but it's like 4 versus 8 nuggets or something like that. But it's not quite a full ingot if you mine it, versus if you smelt it with Silk Touch, you get the full ingot like you would in the overworld.
Do you know that if you smelt redstone, or you do get redstone out of it in a furnace, like all of those ore blocks can be smelted, you just get 1 item. So that's what
I knew that.
That's what it's going to feel like smelting a block of iron now. It's going to be a waste because fortuning it would be better. That's the funniest part of this for me, is that if you smelt, emerald or lapis or any of the stuff that can give you multiple products when you fortune it, right now it can be smelted in a furnace just like any other ore block can, for consistency of mechanics there, but it only gives you 1 item. And so you can really annoy anybody who feels like getting the most efficient amount of items out of everything by just smelting all of your redstone ore and only getting 1 at a time, if you feel like trolling people. Anyway,
it's probably because I watched so many Let's Plays when I first started playing Minecraft that I just learned the right way to do it and never attempted the old way. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
It's what we tend to do. And that, I don't think that ever really was the old way for stuff like redstone and lapis, but it's just a mechanic that they put in case people try to smelt it. You can. You probably shouldn't, but you can. And speaking of smelting, that was another thought I had, was that what if you're smelting an entire piece of iron armor? We've all run across this situation where, like, you get mob drops, or you get something like, a chest plate that you think, oh, I've got diamond now, I may as well smelt down this old iron armor that I'm not going to use anymore, and you only get one flimsy iron nugget out of it, which is, again, 1/9 of a usable iron ingot. I kind of wonder, what if you can scrap your iron armor now and it turns into raw iron that you can then smelt a second time, so there is a bit of effort required, but you can smelt that back into an iron ingot. It feels a bit more realistic to me that way than only salvaging a tiny percentage of an iron chest plate, to me. But that is potentially a balance issue, and I know getting infinite armor from mob spawners kind of maybe makes that a little unbalanced. But yeah, I'm curious as to how those items can get used in other ways than just digging them out of the ground.
I guess it depends on like what you can do in the game and whether or not you're playing in peaceful, because that would be, I mean, it wouldn't happen in peaceful, but like with an iron farm, like who cares about a couple of drops from a zombie spawner?
Yeah,
right? Like it's not going to be a big deal. I'm with you actually, and I've worked on a data pack that allows, it's just a recipe thing where you can put in the iron or diamond armor of choice and get out a better ratio. It was not 1-to-1. You don't get 5 diamonds out of a diamond helmet, but it would be nice to get 2 or 3. You know, as if like breaking it down causes some damage, but you still can salvage some bits out of it. I wrote it because of all the end rating, and I don't even use diamond armor. I wear iron armor for the challenge in the game, and so I'd go end rating and get a bunch of shulker boxes and all this diamond gear that would just sit in a chest. I can't stack it. I can't do anything with it. And, I mean, I could give it to server mates, sure, but like, what if it's Curse of Binding? You know, like just stuff like that. It would be nice to be able to at least get 1 ingot, if not a couple, out of that. That would be great for early game or skyblock. You know, like if you were able to, you know, in a very limited situation where iron is so precious, you know, for hoppers or whatever it is that you want to automate, the fact that you killed a zombie and they dropped their, you know, their chest plate and you get 2 ingots out of that, like that would be amazing. Like you said, raw iron rather.
Yeah. A couple of minor changes to touch on from the snapshot before we move on to emails. Fully oxidized copper now being waxable doesn't quite make sense at first, but then you consider that they've just added a mechanic where lightning bolts clean the patina off of copper blocks, so they kind of reverse the aging process a couple of stages. I think it's probably a good thing that we can now wax that. Again, also for consistency, because I found when I introduced copper to people in videos and whatnot, they would always say, like, why isn't there a waxed, fully oxidized copper block in the creative inventory? And I said, well, because you don't need to wax it at that point. It's aged as far as it possibly will. But this prevents the reverse of that process of it being de-aged by being cleaned off. I'm not certain. I suppose you can do this with an axe now as well, because you can apply wax with honeycomb and then you scrape it off with an axe before you scrape off the aging of the copper block. So I guess it doesn't necessarily prevent players from doing that, but it prevents lightning strikes from ruining your carefully created builds, I suppose.
Man, there's a way to troll somebody.
Yeah.
Walk around and strip the wax off their copper. Oh, man.
And then install a lightning rod in a careful location.
Yeah, I could do that too. Something else from the El Mango video that I'll have a link to in the show notes because it was so well put together is that with the addition of raw copper and waxed oxidized copper and related blocks, there are now 36 different items in the copper block family coming in Caves of Cliffs.
There you go. Copper has more depth than you think, although I think people are still looking forward to it doing more than blocks, the lightning rod and the spyglass. But we will see. There is time for copper. And now it's time for email. If you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. First of all, we have a follow-up from last week's show. So Much Lag, our correspondent from last week, wrote in to add that the mod pack they mentioned in their email last week, which was about branch mining versus mining in caves, was called Rebirth of the Night. It's often listed as ROTN. And that was the one where the ores weren't subsurface. You would find all of the ores just at surface level in caves. So interesting. If you want to check out that, you can go ahead and find Rebirth of the Night. Our first email this week, though, comes in from Calamari King, who wanted to write to us about mob spawns and ambience in the Deep Dark. Hello, Pix and Joel. Recently, when exploring the new 1.17 cave generation, I was experiencing many deaths due to the amount of mobs that spawned and jumped on me from above. This was fine, as I know that it adds challenge to the game and I was playing on hard mode, but after pondering on it for a while, I was wondering whether normal hostile mobs, such as creepers, zombies, skeletons, etc., should spawn in the Deep Dark. In my opinion, mobs shouldn't spawn in the Deep Dark as it could prove an irritating challenge, and many players could lose their items due to getting overpowered by normal mobs and the Warden. However, my main reasoning for thinking this is that it could ruin the ambience and mood of the Deep Dark. In my mind, the Deep Dark seems like a very lonely, creepy place, and having lots of hostile mobs down there could disrupt this. Also, the skulk sensor would be very annoying with too many hostile mobs. I'd be curious to see your guys' stance on the hostile mob spawns in the Deep Dark, as well as seeing how you picture the mood of the Deep Dark. Calamari King was shot off a ladder. These are just death messages people are writing at the end of their emails now. It's a little bit macabre, but I guess that fits the tone of the correspondence, right?
Yes. Yeah. I wonder if it was a clever exit or a rehash of what happened.
Yeah, it could have been a flashback
in the Deep Dark. Yeah, in the Deep Dark corners of the world. I never thought about like vast amounts of mobs spawning in the deep, combined with skulk sensors and the xylophone that would happen as a result. That could actually be really noisy. Like it could sound like a circus if you're in the right spot or the wrong spot, depending on how you want to look at it. I don't know whether that could work to your advantage, though. It might make fighting the Warden better if the Warden goes after skeletons and zombies. If you're sneaking around not making any noise and they're making a ruckus, that might be your ticket to get out of there or just not deal with the Warden at all, right? So that could be advantageous depending on which way you look at it. But I agree with, so far, my jump to conclusion impression of the Deep Dark is dark, quiet, spooky, very little noise outside of the weird things coming out of skulk sensors in the Warden. Like, I don't anticipate hearing zombies and skeletons making it feel new, or scary. It just makes me feel, it's just the same old, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know about having like no overworld hostile mobs spawning below Y0, but perhaps in whatever zone or area they designate as Deep Dark, perhaps they just won't start there. They won't spawn within the Deep Dark. So there's a chance for you to be 16 or 20 blocks away from anything that's going to make a traditional hostile mob noise when you're in the Deep Dark and have more unique experience.
Yeah, there are a few different ways this could be done. I think Christopher in our live chat has just suggested if skulk blocks are unspawnable, that could allow for mobs to be prevented from spawning in that area rather than have to work out like programmatically what kind of like Deep Dark zone is that mobs wouldn't spawn. Because we kind of figure that the underground biomes aren't really going to be biomes in that sort of pre-coded sense. They're going to be more just regions of biome paint over the top of things. We feel like maybe the Deep Dark is going to be the same. There needs to be some way of keeping other mobs out of there, because this email is exactly right. It's going to confuse the Warden and make it a less creepy experience for players if they're not one-on-one with this enormous monster. And I feel like there are too many things that could prove to be a distraction in that respect. And also, it compromises the player's sense of, well, I have to sneak around now, because sneaking around doesn't work for the other mobs. If a skeleton sees you, it's going to shoot you, and then you probably have to fight back, and then, the jig is up. So, yeah, I do think, when the Warden is implemented, I think we're going to see players, if mobs get introduced to those area, trying to use one or two mobs tactically rather than them spawning in a place like that. Because you're right, a lot of the ambience comes from a kind of one-on-one horror experience, like the feeling of being chased is, quite important to horror as a genre. And I think that's the way people are going to feel when they're running away from the Warden. Having a bunch of zombies and stuff coming in at you from the walls might, heighten that somewhat, but it's also going to distract you from the main experience of the whole thing. You're going to be running from everything at that point rather than running from one thing specifically. I think the trick is going to be how we bring in passive mobs into the Deep Dark, and I was kind of wondering about this because of the demonstration we've seen being, throwing a snowball, distracting the warden with the noise that the projectile makes as it impacts on the wall, and bringing a stack of eggs with you into the deep dark, and how much of a distraction that can potentially be, because one egg breaking against the wall, distracts the warden for a second. One egg breaking against the wall and then turning into 4 chickens could potentially distract the warden for a lot longer. And so it remains to be seen how much those other mobs are going to really factor into skulk sensor stuff, and whether the warden is going to want to fight them or not. I think with skulk sensors, we've seen them dial into specifically actions that the player can take and separate those out into the different frequencies that can be detected and turned into redstone signals with a comparator. So the warden could potentially be programmed to ignore other mob sounds and only really zero in on sounds that the player makes specifically. But I see that being more of an issue than just removing mobs from the environment entirely. So I think it just makes more sense for there to be fewer mobs there overall.
I also kind of wonder whether there's some fun mechanics that could be just, I don't want to say exploited, but enjoyed by, if you find the warden and you want to use the warden to run your mob farm, like how cool would it be if you just send all your mobs into a room with the warden and just let him do his worst or their worst, right? Like there's some fun potential there. So I hope that it's not like a will always ignore hostile mobs situation, and more that the environment that the warden is naturally found in is just not conducive to mobs spawning or mobs getting to them. But we don't know. The deep dark might not be connected to any caves. You might have to dig to get to it all the time, which means that, traditional hostile mobs couldn't get to it naturally.
For sure. Yeah, it's I'm just really curious to see how the warden is going to work at all.
Me too.
At this point,
Mm-hmm.
Every week I feel like I repeat myself going, if this week is the warden snapshot, then all bets are off. But we got to see. We can't rush these things.
Next email comes in from Elcorn95, a landscape artist member in our community. Lighting options in caves and cliffs. Hi, Jonny and Joel. I really liked your discussion in episode 135 about the light block and how a universal light source, while intended for creative use, would be pretty desirable in survival, although tough to implement. As I pondered that myself, I wondered if a midway solution is found in a mechanic introduced with the light block and could be implemented to give us more versatile light overall, a dimmer. The light block can be quote-unquote tuned to a particular light level between 0 and 15 by clicking on it. Why couldn't that functionality be given to both varieties of lanterns as well as a redstone lamp? While this doesn't solve the problem of mob proofing, it would provide a level of lighting and versatility that we've only sort of gotten at this point with sea pickles and the upcoming candles. Quote-unquote mighty curious as to what you might think of the idea. Thanks for reading this and the great podcast, the Mighty Elcorn. And I say that without the quotes because the Mighty Elcorn is the nickname that Elcorn has received in my Twitch chat.
Yeah.
Thanks for the great email, Elcorn. I really appreciate it. I was thinking about this as well, and seeing as redstone power also goes from 0 to 15, I was wondering if giving things like redstone lamps a light level based on the redstone power received might be a possible, I don't want to say solution, but a possible light level like feature that you could be, adding into the game. Though I'm not sure if that's technically problematic in the way that like a redstone lamp will power the lamp next to it currently in this sometimes. At least it used to be like that. So like I don't know how that might work technically, but I like the idea of having some sort of player control. The issue there, of course, is that if you wanted to create a series of lights that would be dimmable, the redstone that you'd have to implement in behind the scenes would just be really kind of gangly, I would imagine, to try and sort out. Sea pickles and candles make sense as they are, with more candles giving off more light or the reverse. Old-fashioned lanterns were traditionally trimmed, controlling both the smoke inside, but also the light that they were giving out. So I could see that mechanic being implemented with lanterns. Like you could, if you add a little squeak noise to it when you click on it, it could sound like you're dialing back the wick, or you're increasing if it's it's supposed to be like a natural kerosene lamp or something, like maybe you're adding more fuel or reducing the fuel that's being burned. That kind of thing could be kind of cool. I don't know if if all 16 levels of light into a lantern would necessarily make sense. I feel like they might, if it was implemented, it would be probably less than 15. You'd probably get like, multiples of 3 or 5, to kind of see, because from examples that we have in the game so far, there's not a lot of increments of 1 between different light sources. Things like soul sand torches versus regular torches, soul sand lanterns versus regular lanterns. There's a discrepancy, but it's usually in chunks of 3 or 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sort of curious about why this hasn't been done before, because it seems a bit like a no-brainer to give the player more of an adjustable light source. The sea pickles and candles, it's like 3, 6, 9, 12, or whatever sort of increments it happens to be. I think it makes a lot of sense, but it's the kind of thing that they want players to have less control over, maybe so they come up with more analog solutions for it, in kind of the same way that for redstone we don't just have one block that does everything. You kind of have to work out the circuitry for a lot of stuff. I sort of feel like I saw Etho do a redstone lighting setup a while ago that was it was a dimmer that happened, it came into the floor, because of course the floor being the most sensible place to light the ground around you to prevent mob spawns. But if you just stacked a column of redstone lamps underneath the floor, because redstone lamps are transparent and will let light through from other redstone lamps below them, you just had to activate them in a sequence vertically, and you effectively got a dimmer. And then you could kind of control that using maybe an item frame on the wall linked to a comparator, or, whatever you happen to want. So there are ways of doing this kind of thing already, but they are much more complex than just right-clicking on a block. And I don't know if it's maybe not wanting to implement too many things like note blocks, which just kind of fiddly to work with, and then, one misclick can lead to you having to cycle through the entire thing again, and it gets kind of repetitive, in the same way that breaking and rehanging a painting over and over again so that you get the right painting on the wall feels repetitive. I sort of wonder if maybe there's kind of like maybe a pushback against giving players that level of control, just because it becomes too fiddly to work with after a while.
Yeah, I could see that. I have an idea for a data pack that I'm currently trying to work through. I won't get into too many details here, so big old fat teaser here. For the light block and how that might be given to the player in survival, and what that could look like potentially. But I don't know quite yet how to do it. I have an idea for the concept, but I don't know enough yet about how to code a data pack. But I think I'm going to use the excuse to learn how to code a data pack, which would be fun in itself. And I've had some people offer to help as well, which is going to be fun too. But yeah, like I feel like, to get into the minutia of like all 16 stages of a light thing, it's someone in our chat mentioned that there's already a multiple number of blocks. The problem there is that they have different placeability features. There's things that happen, like there's noise and smoke with campfires. There's lanterns can't be placed on the walls, which seems so bizarre to me, that you have to put a torch on a wall that looks like it's just stuck there, but this thing that has a metal casing I can't fasten to the wall.
Yeah.
So there's all these limitations about where you can put things.
Lava is going to burn stuff. Sea pickles have to be placed in water to produce light, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, sea pickles on land are, imaginary candles for now until we get real candles in 117. Like they really don't have much use. Again, outside of data packs, I've seen people use them for different models and things. But like it's one of those things where like I can see the potential, and I think so many people see the potential. But then when it comes to the actual implementation, you start to trip up real quick, right?
Yeah. I think that's the case. So yeah, I'm curious. I think it's nice that we at least have the light block, because that leaves the door open for something like this to be implemented in future. And for now, it's good as an option for creative players. And I think maybe it also comes down to survival players not really needing anything other than just the brightest thing possible. Like, the different levels of lighting, while fun, don't really impact most people's game in ways other than preventing mob spawning. You don't see people using light as an artistic thing so much. But maybe that's because we don't have the option to do that. I'm not entirely certain. And then if it was just redstone lamps, then a redstone lamp isn't going to look good in all of the places that you want to have dimmable lights. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to consider, I think, when lighting is considered. When lighting is on the table, I think it's probably going to be a matter of a massive overhaul further down the line than just kind of individual little changes like this.
Moving on into the main discussion, you had some thoughts about what these raw ore changes were going to do to the caving experience in Minecraft.
Yeah, I was thinking about just changes to the caving meta in general. I mean, ore distribution having been such a big change to that, the addition of all of these other blocks below the world that we currently know as well. And now we have fortune being useful for iron and gold and copper. We have some ores being more hidden behind walls so that players consider strategies like diving into flooded areas in order to get their first iron. Stuff like that is really starting to open up the caving meta and making a variety of strategies more viable. And so I was wondering if we could just do kind of a recap of that, along with some more of our thoughts from this week's Snapshot and the changes to ore blocks, because I really feel like with these changes, caving is being rebalanced to have much more long-term and late-game benefits. The path through survival in 1.16 and earlier really feels like it's been, early get hold of iron, get hold of diamonds. As soon as you need a higher quantity of iron, make an iron farm. As soon as you want to make, a large-scale storage system, you need all of the iron for hoppers and everything like that, you make an iron farm. I don't think that's going to change, but I think caving is now going to be a much more viable option than it was before on account of fortuning iron being a possibility. And I think the desire to get as much as possible out of every ore block as early as possible is going to lead to more experienced players leaving a lot of iron ore alone until they can get hold of a fortune pick, potentially exploring villagers or rushing enchanting tables to get hold of early fortune tools, and then going back into caves and mining out all of the iron that they've left behind. I was wondering, obviously you've got a fairly established server right now, so you're not really hurting for iron as such, and you've got an iron farm set up already, but do you see yourself going after iron when you go caving after the update arrives, or do you think you're just going to keep relying on your iron farm for that?
Well, I mean, despite having an iron farm, it's pretty far away, and I still can't control myself when I'm in a cave underneath the medieval city and I happen to see iron in the wall. I mine it.
Yeah,
because it's like a twitch. I kind of have to. But I was thinking about this a lot because I do want to do a new single player Snapshot survival playthrough, and I was thinking about how I'm going to approach this, like what's going to be the most efficient use of time. How am I going to do this differently than when I first played Minecraft so I can have a different experience? And I don't see myself walking past iron and waiting for fortune because I know how often you can find iron in the ground. With more ground to sort through, and if it's going to be available in caves, and the caves are going to be more interesting and more fun to go through, then I see myself getting iron as I see it while I'm working towards fortune. That's probably what I would do. Whether that's going to a village, like whatever it happens to be, I'm going to need to get an iron pickaxe to get going anyway. So like, I'm not going to just wait until I have all the things. But I see myself, as I mentioned before, I tend to go more for silk touch than I go for fortune. But given the new ways that these ores drop, specifically when I go into a new world, I miss automation. Like I start farming things by hand. I start, having to do all that kind of stuff by hand, and it's entertaining for about 30 minutes. And I'm just like, okay, now I have to go back and get more bread because I ran out of food. Like, where's my auto chicken cooker? Like all that kind of stuff. But those things all require things like redstone and whatnot to help out. And in some cases, gold for powered rails, things that might require your redstone contraptions might be required to have these things in order to work. So I think for experienced players, this change might be a refreshing bit where you're not going to miss that automation quite as much.
Yeah.
As you're establishing a foothold in the new world. I think that might be good. Like in a great way, you might slow players down a little bit rather than the race to beat the Ender Dragon on the first day of a server, like, and all that kind of stuff that you see on YouTube. I feel like you might see a little bit more of a change of pace for people that might want to explore a different way, or if they have enough iron coming in, they might not feel that need to go get an iron farm until, like you said, they're at that stage where, okay, now I'm making hoppers faster than I'm finding iron in the walls of these caves. It's going to be a lot more work.
Yeah. I think that's the most important aspect of this, is to recognize that it's a rebalancing, but not a replacement for anything else, right? Because I've seen a few people getting paranoid that this means Mojang is going to revisit and nerf iron farms again, and I don't expect that to be the case, largely because, you know, you're taking the blocks out of the ground. They are gone forever. You know, a renewable source of iron is still really quite valuable to servers long term, and even to single player worlds on a long enough scale. You're going to deplete all of the actual resources in an area, and while there might be the occasional vein of iron still left in the walls of a cave that you didn't quite mine through at the time, you are not going to get all of your iron this way. So I think a more balanced approach to things, and maybe being a little bit more fair with resources earlier on when you have such a broad player base on some of these more public servers, you're going to find that having more iron this way is really good and helps get your early game going, if not necessarily faster, then without the need to go and look up the latest iron farm tutorial right away. And with caves being a bit more fun to explore as well, it just encourages the caving experience in a way that people feel has been lacking from Minecraft for quite a while. There's one thing Simply Sark pointed out on Twitter when it comes to the difference between stone iron ore and deep slate iron ore, is that they are two completely separate blocks, and as such, there is the potential for deep slate iron and deep slate gold to have an increased chance of dropping more raw material in future. So maybe rewarding players for searching that far down in the world, and again, maybe contributing to inventory clutter a little bit more than they've expected it to, but deep slate iron could drop a greater range of stuff with fortune. It could be between 1 and 6 instead of between 1 and 4 items, and then you have a little bit more reason to go mining for iron in those deep slate layers, scarce though it is, because it gets a little bit less as you go that far down in the world. I think maybe mechanics like that are going to encourage a little bit more strategy again in caving, and again change the meta a little bit for where you find these materials and which patches of materials you go for, if there is potential for certain regions to have more valuable supplies of the same thing.
I think that's something that I missed out on the Nether update, because we already had the established server. We already explored the Nether, found where we needed to go, had an established hub, gold farm, wither skeleton farm. We had all that stuff. So I didn't have that new shiny, we have to go through this Crimson Forest, Warped Forest to get to the Nether fortress that we don't know where it is, you know? And I'm sure it's an assumption, but I feel like the changes to ore distribution, the changing in raw ore and making it more appealing to mine iron in the, we'll call it an old-fashioned way, for the lack of a better term, is a deliberate move by design to try and not necessarily slow down the player in early game, but to allow the player to enjoy, or as you mentioned via, Simply Sark's idea, incentivize the player to explore more and enjoy the Caves and Cliffs update. Because if it wasn't the case, if nothing was changing, if the ore distribution wasn't happening, if the raw iron and raw gold wasn't a thing, players would just be straight to making iron farms, right? It would just, I shouldn't say players, some players would be skipping over content that Mojang is working very hard on and would potentially miss it.
Yeah.
And then you have people going like, well, I didn't really see much about the Caves and Cliffs update. It's like, well, that's because you didn't take the time.
That's because you're not digging straight down enough.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and this is something that I'm a little concerned about, I guess. I mean, because I'm a builder and because things look so cool in the new underground stuff, like I'm going to be seeking it out to do an underground build. Like that's going to be what happens. But I don't need to go there for resources. No one does on the Citadel when we update it, right? It's going to be purely for what does it look like? What's it like to go explore it, right? It's purely adventure as opposed to any kind of need. Unless we did something where, we'd start like a zone where people would be asked to leave everything behind and like teleport, out there and try to live out there for like a couple months, which actually could be kind of fun. I just thought about that right now.
Yeah.
But like stuff like that could be kind of cool. But I feel like, the appeal and the changes there are, I don't want to, I can't say, because I don't know how, the developers at Mojang feel about things like iron farms and whatnot. They obviously keep them in the game. If they hated them with the passion of 1,000 suns, they would have just removed them. But it can't feel good if you're putting all this care and all this work into beautiful artwork and gameplay and experiences and all this thought that we know that Mojang puts into this kind of stuff, only to have players skip over it because they just want to rush to get more things. And I feel like this is a deliberate slowdown in a very good way. I think it's balanced. Like you said, it doesn't remove anything. I think anybody that thinks that iron farms are going to go away might be wearing a tinfoil hat. Like I'm sure they're going to stay pretty much the way that they are. Although, question, while I put on my tinfoil visor just a little bit, do you think iron golems will continue to drop iron ingots? Or would there be a chance that they might drop raw iron? It's still the same result. You still get an iron ingot. You would just have to smelt it first.
Yeah, like I kind of touched on this earlier. I think at that point, iron golems are still meant to feel a little bit more like they've been refined into the iron constructs that we have. And it might change things up, but it's not going to change things a huge amount. We already have iron farms that output into composters so that the poppies can get turned into bone meal. It wouldn't take a great deal of care to just run the raw iron that iron farms dropped into a furnace or a blast furnace first, and then it just gets output to a chest from there. There'd be virtually no difference except the need to refuel it every now and again, which is just a chest full of buckets of lava or coal blocks or whatever you happen to have. So yeah, I still want them to use raw iron for other things here and there because it's nice that it exists, and a lot of the time in Minecraft we get multiple ways of acquiring the same thing, and there are multiple paths to, iron farms versus mining for iron is one example of that, right? So potentially we can see it be used for other stuff in other places. I'm trying to think about changes to caving that are going to be along the same lines as this, like small things that are just going to make caving a little bit more of a fun incentive for people. And I personally wonder if the minecart has a greater role to play in future caving adventures. And we're obviously going to revisit minecarts a lot in future discussions because they have expressed in the past that the developers want to overhaul minecarts at some stage. But right now, I think minecart tracks are mostly player-made, right? The one exception being abandoned mine shafts where the tracks don't really lead anywhere. And I was thinking of an example from the game Terraria, which we know Minecraft devs and Terraria devs have like a very kind of a good relationship. Like they've clearly recommended each other's games in the past and so forth. One thing Terraria does really well is generate underground minecart tracks, which you can ride as soon as you find them, and which usually, if not always, terminate in or near some sort of feature of the underground. So you ride it from whatever point you happen to stumble upon it to one end. You normally find something like an underground structure, or it ends in a cave filled with gemstones, and sometimes it's a den of spiders, and it's a bad thing, and, fool you for jumping on this minecart and not thinking where you were going, just getting in without considering the consequences. But then minecart tracks can also take the player through dangerous areas like a lava pool or a long section of water where you might run out of oxygen. There are a variety of ways that minecarts get used, and then players can also use them to set up their own infrastructure. And so I was wondering maybe if in future you could find abandoned mine shafts that actually go somewhere, and we've talked about them terminating in geodes on the show before, just in terms of finding a geode attached to an abandoned mineshaft. But I think it'd be really fun to have a minecart rail that you could get on and it actually still led you somewhere like a roller coaster, and that lends a sense of adventure to caving, whilst also then rewarding the player for taking that risk of potentially running into a dungeon spawner and suddenly being surrounded by mobs, or maybe just coming out in a cave that has one of those larger nodes of diamond or redstone, or one of the sort of larger veins of material in it.
I love the idea. Like, can you imagine you're going down the minecart rail that you decided to explore. You just hit go, caution to the wind, and it forks up ahead of you. And you can see the switch that you have to shoot with the arrow to make it to switch it, and you don't know which way to go, and you just hope that it goes to the basket of gold and not the cave spider spawner that dumps you into spider webs, like instant death, right? I mean, it could be really high risk reward. The only thing that I would see being really challenging about that would be the way that they do abandoned mine shafts now, with them hanging from ceilings and being broken up by the cheese caves and stuff like that. I feel like more often than not, even if a mine shaft was carefully designed to do that, there'd only be so many ways it could come together before it starts to be like, you've seen three, you've seen them all.
Yeah.
And it has so much potential to be interrupted by, like, well, I was on the way to someplace cool, but now I'm going into a brick wall because the cave generated and cut the minecart part off.
Yeah.
Which would eliminate, like, if all the mine shafts were clean, then it would also eliminate them being abandoned and caved in and kind of busted up and stuff.
Yeah, I sort of like the idea of there being a mine shaft that generates bisected by a ravine, and then you think you're getting to the end of a minecart track and it just dumps you into a ravine at the end of it and goes, well, fend for yourself. I think there's some fun to be had there, obviously, with the right amount of, like you said, careful curation and stuff like that. But that kind of ties into another thing I thought could change about caving in future and the caving meta in general. And this ties into something Zero Fox apparently wrote to us a couple of weeks ago. Abandoned mine shafts could maybe do with an overhaul beyond what they've had already. I think in terms of the resources you can acquire there, more so than the aesthetic look of them and them generating in caves, I think it'd be fun to have more themed mine shafts, in the same way that the Badlands biome has its own variant, and we know Badlands has more surface gold, so it's often good to go looking there. And even more surface gold now that we have raw gold as an option. But I was wondering if maybe some sort of surface mine entrance structure would be cool. Could be the start of one of these minecart tracks, or perhaps like, a coal mine in mountain biomes or something like that. But then maybe finding areas where whatever civilization has left these mine shafts behind has been mining specifically for redstone, and you find more redstone in those shafts than others, and maybe lapis in another one. Perhaps not diamond, because then that just means an enormous windfall, and people seek out specifically the diamond mine shafts. But I think there could be some fun to be had having more of a thematic element to mine shafts, especially if they generate further down in the world.
I love the idea of having like a specific mine shaft. Like I think that because I really enjoyed the experience that I had when I found an abandoned mine shaft in a mesa for the first time, because I didn't know they did that. I didn't know they were made of dark oak wood, and I didn't know that they had more gold in them.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, cool. It's on the surface. They do that? Like, I had no clue. And it was a really fun experience. And I think that you could really have some fun with that, because similar to, and this is again a rudimentary understanding of it, but similar to lush caves and dripstone caves, you could just apply them in the same way in terms of, like, the biome paint, for the lack of a better term, and have them appear in specific, not just biomes, but like areas in the overworld generation that would be specific to all the different resources that you can get. And again, I agree with the exception of diamond, because that would be OP, and just it would drive players to go straight there. But yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, Badlands are the only biomes where abandoned mineshaft generation really reaches the surface. I think maybe once or twice I've seen one in an ocean biome by accident, where like a layer of gravel hasn't generated properly and has exposed, the pillars and stuff for an abandoned mineshaft underneath. But I think it'd be kind of cool to have more hints about where they were. They're fun to stumble on, and especially as you're caving, you start to see them more and more in the snapshots. But I do sort of wonder if there is room for them elsewhere in the world, or a structure like them, as we get into other things that can make caving more exciting for players, and other strategies that players can employ to find specific resources. I think that's pretty much all we've got time for on this week's show, but if you have any suggestions related to this week's topic of how the caving meta could still evolve in future updates, then you can email the show once again. The email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. That's going to be it for this episode. You can find more information about the show and some of the stuff we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and the Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you get some value out of the show, please consider putting some value back in at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. That's where you can join our community. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live if you're up at that time, and it also gets us closer to our next milestone goal, the monthly Minecraft audio hangout. We actually had a patron hangout this weekend talking about the behind-the-scenes elements of how we make the show and going over some facts and figures with the crew. It was really nice to chat to everybody about those. That is also now up on the Patreon RSS feed if you want to listen to that. And we also revealed that we are now back up to 245 patrons, which is an increase of 7 from last week. Thank you so much to everybody who has jumped on board or even increased their pledge recently. Really appreciated. And special thanks go out to our content engineers, General Pattern 82, Greener Canuck, Hunter 555, Jumbo Sale, and Yitz for their support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram, but a personal recommendation is by far the easiest way to share the podcast. Just poke a friend in the arm from a safe distance, tell them about The Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen. Those places include iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and even YouTube. Honestly, wherever you can find a podcast, you can find The Spawn Chunks. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please use that email address. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can find the render distance, the extended version of the podcast, and the bonus stuff that we do, like quarterly hangouts and any future goals.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixorifs. That's how you can find me on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm going to skip my usual plugs this week to plug another podcast that I was a guest on. My college friend AJ runs a Dungeons & Dragons actual play podcast called Pretending with Dice, and in their off-season they do a bunch of world building and interview shows. AJ and I were able to catch up and talk about Minecraft, becoming a career content creator, and my first steps into D&D. It was the first time I've actually spoken to him for about 10 years, because we know each other from like way back. So it was a really fun chat. You can find that at pretendingwithdice.podbean.com. We'll have a link to the exact episode in the show notes, but if you want to check out the show, you can also find it wherever you find your usual podcasts. Joel, where can people find you online?
Well, immediately after this show, people can find me online listening to Pretending with Dice, because that sounds like a fantastic interview. Everything else I'm doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. The Citadel Cafe is my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. You can find that at thecitadelcafe.com. Megan and I talked about Dota, Dragon's Blood, as well as Star Trek Picard last week. And of course, Stephen and I are talking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier on the one that's in the hopper. You can find me at Joel Duggan on social media and at Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I'm playing an awful lot of Minecraft, having some fun and Satisfactory, and who knows what's next. Come on by.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite. And to quote Gordon Ramsay, it's raw!